morning. Welcome to a fresh edition of your program on Leadership Television, your breakfast show inside Nigeria. My name is Winifred Webo, your host on the program. It sure feels good to be back on the station. And of course, without wasting much time, we'll head up to the national newspapers this Tuesday morning and see what they are leading with. And of course, is the story of the reported abduction of schoolgirls in Kebbi State that is getting traction on some of the daily national newspapers in Nigeria this morning. And of course, that includes Nigeria's most influential newspaper, Leadership. My name is Winifred Webo. Thanks once again for joining us. We head up to Leadership newspaper, and the leading story says Tinubu Vows swift rescue of 25 kidnapped school girls as police comb forest. Kebbi school principal says bandits stormed premises midnight. That story continues on page 4 of Leadership newspaper. Tinubu Vows swift rescue of 25 kidnapped school girls as police comb forest. Kebbi school principal says bandits stormed premises midnight. The leading story continues on page 4 of Leadership. And just beneath that leading story, we have sad news also gracing the cover of Leadership. Of course, is the demise of a media icon, you will say. Dan Agbese passes on yesterday, November 17 to 2025. His demise has deprived the nation of a distinct voice, Garba Shehu. Death marks end of an era in journalism, David Mark. He was an exceptional editor and leader, says former colleague at Newswatch, Babarin Sa. Dan Agbese was also an editor, co-founder of Newswatch newspaper alongside with the late Dele Giwa. May his soul rest in perfect peace. The story continues on page 7 of Leadership newspaper. Media icon Dan Agbese passes on. Still on the cover of Leadership newspaper, New People's Democratic Party chair Turaki reports Wike's camp to police, and that story is on page 14 of Leadership. Of course, there's no end in sight yet to the crisis beleveling the opposition, People's Democratic Party. New People's Democratic Party chair Turaki reports Wike's camp to police, and at Ibadan convention recently last weekend, actually, there was a move to suspend and expel the FCT minister, Nyesom Wike. On the business buzz of Leadership, inflation rate slows to 16.1% in October as food prices hit 8-year low. Inflation rate slows to 16.1% in October as food prices hit 8-year low. We'll take some excerpts from that business story. Nigeria's inflation rate slowed to 16.1% in October 2025, marking a significant easing as the country's food prices reached their lowest level in over 8 years, according to data from the National Bureau of Statistics. Food inflation, which constitutes the largest portion of the Consumer Price Index (CPI) basket, dropped sharply to 13.12% from 16.87% in September, driven by falling prices for staples such as maize, garri, beans, and various meats, the report showed. The overall headline inflation rate also eased to 16.05%, the lowest since March 2022, with food inflation continuing its downward trend due to factors such as improved food supply and currency stability. Kudos to Nigeria as inflation rate slows to 16.1%. Of course, it's something to cheer about. But still on Leadership newspaper, Zulum calls for joint military operation in Lake Chad as justice must never be for sale. President tells judiciary. The story is on page 16 of Leadership. Justice must never be for sale. President tells judiciary. Continental Free Trade Area. Nigeria rolls out preferential tariffs. And lastly, on the cover of, no, not lastly, on the cover, still on the main cover of Leadership, Wike and the Rule of Law by J.B. Daudu, senior advocate of Nigeria. Wike and the Rule of Law by J.B. Daudu, son. And that takes us to the stories about the masthead of Leadership. Fayose attacks Obasanjo, says he has dementia. Unresolved issues, varsity lecturers threaten fresh showdown with government, and that story is on page 8 of Leadership newspaper. We move ahead to the inside page where we have a stand on page 3 of Leadership, and today's stand is on managed football as business. Today's stand in leadership, manage football as business. Perhaps we'll take some excerpts also from that stand. The long-standing issue of unpaid bonuses for players and officials of the Super Eagles again reared its ugly head moments before the crucial match against Gabon in the semi-final playoff for the 2026 World Cup qualification. The team cited a lack of payment of match bonuses. This trend has festered for a long time and caused to question the motive behind the non-payment of match allowances to these players and officials. As a newspaper, we are aware that in January 2024, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu earmarked the sum of 12 billion naira to clear the backlog owed to players and officials of the male and female national teams. Therefore, we find it curious as to why the Nigerian Football Federation, NFFF, increasingly finds it difficult to ensure the timely payment of match bonuses and allowances to players and match officials. Now we'll move to the stand itself in our stand, where the newspaper actually takes a stand, and that is towards the conclusion of the editorial. It says, thirdly, government interference should be drastically reduced. For example, in 2014, FIFA suspended Nigeria from international competition after football leaders were fired by the government following the team's World Cup exit, and the court order from a federal high court compelled the then Minister of Sports to appoint a civil servant to take over the running of the NFF. Though the suspension lasted only 9 days after the court order was lifted, it painted a grim picture of the negative impact of government interference in football administration in the country. We therefore urge that the recent embarrassment over unpaid bonuses by the Super Eagles is a reflection of the larger issues in football administration in Nigeria, and the need for reforming football administration in the country cannot be overemphasized. Today's stand in Leadership newspaper, which runs on page 3 of the paper, manage football as business. This is coming to an advice going to the authorities. From page 3, we move to the back page of Leadership, where we have Tuesday column with Abdurrauf Aliyu. Today is writing on Nigeria's institutions under the sun. And that column, we have the picture of the Lieutenant Yerima and the FCT Minister Nyesom Wike, of course, heralding that story in Nigeria's institutions under the sun. Before we leave the back page column, let's visit Ghana Must Go. On the news, you are very irresponsible. Fayose blast Obasanjo again. And Ghana Must Go ask, will this fight ever end? Will this fight ever end? Over to you, former President Olusegun Obasanjo and former Ekiti State Governor Fayose. And of course, it will also be recalled that Obasanjo actually graced the birthday anniversary of the former governor of Ekiti State. And now we are having this rumble coming out again after that event. Well, that concludes the review of Leadership newspaper this Tuesday. For more, log into the website of Leadership newspaper. Like I said earlier, the news of the kidnapped or abduction of 25 schoolgirls in Kebbi State gained traction in today's national newspapers. The next on the line is Nigerian Tribune. Nigerian Tribune says federal government to security agencies, 25 schoolgirls abducted in Kebbi must be rescued. Police deploy tactical team for rescue operation. ISWAP intercepts army signal, kills commander in Borno. Troops hit terrorist enclave, square farmer header clashes in Northwest North Central. This story continues on page 3 of Nigerian Tribune. Federal government to security agencies, 25 schoolgirls abducted in Kebbi must be rescued. Ahead of Governor Kefa's defection, Taraba Assembly Speaker, 15 others dump PDP for APC. Why Southwest must back Tinubu to win second term Yoruba group. Tinubu salutes Oyebamji at 60, describes him as steady hand in Nigeria's financial political landscape. Fayose abuses Obasanjo again. There is another news gaining traction. It was on the cover of Leadership newspaper, the paper we reviewed before this. Accuses him of making very irresponsible comments at his birthday. Your message reveals you are unchanged and unchangeable, Obasanjo replies. PDP, despite expulsion, Wike faction summons neck BOT meetings today. Turaki faces meeting at same venue, says we are ready to lay down our lives for democracy. NWC meets with FCT police. McAfee resigns as BOT secretary. Kick us to the leading story on today's Nigerian Tribune's cover. PDP, despite expulsion, Wike fashion summons neck BOT meetings to today. Is also the great leading story on Leadership newspaper. About the masthead of Nigerian Tribune, Oedo unveils landmark agricultural mechanization drive. Governor seeks Obaseki's repatriation to Nigeria. Nigeria's inflation eases to 16.05% in October. Lagos 200 billion naira bond oversubscribed by 55% at 310 billion naira. 14.8 billion naira green bond attracts 29.2 billion naira, all 97.7% over subscription. Lastly, on the cover of Nigerian Tribune this Tuesday, on their head news, we have scientists announce game-changing vaccine for Lassa fever, and that story continues on page 2 of Nigerian Tribune, and that also concludes review of Nigerian Tribune this Tuesday. For more, log into the website of Nigerian Tribune newspaper. We head up to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is the Daily Times, talking about the abduction of 25 Kebbi school girls. The Daily Times says bandits abduct 25 Kebbi school girls, kill one teacher. Bandits abduct 25 Kebbi school girls, kill one teacher. Trouble looms as PDP faction set to occupy Wadata Secretariat. Leading story today in Leadership, in Nigerian Tribune, and also in Daily Times. Government kidnap parish priest, kill one, abduct cause in fresh attack in Kaduna. Above the masthead of the Daily Times, judgment shouldn't be for sale. Tinubu charges judiciary. Inflation falls to 16.05% as price pressures ease nationwide, coming from MBS. Leading stories today on the Daily Times newspaper. For more, don't forget to log in to the website of the Daily Times. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup this Tuesday, and that is The Punch. The Punch takes it further from the kidnap of 25 school girls. It says mass abductions return. 145 missing in 4 days. Mass adoptions return. 145 missing in 4 days. Leading story on today's The Punch newspaper. Kidnapped Kebbi school girls, Zamfara. Niger villagers search intensifies. Atiku PDP reacts. Federal government pledges swift rescue. And that is the leading story on today's The Punch newspaper. Mass abductions return. 145 missing in 4 days. Tinubu calls for corruption-free judiciary at Judges Conference. President Bola Tinubu at the 2025 All-Nigerian Judges Conference of the Superior Court in Abuja on Monday. We have the picture of the president alongside the judges at their conference in Abuja on Monday yesterday. Federal government receives Benin bronzes repatriated from U.S. and that story is on page 38 of The Punch. Federal government receives Benin bronzes repatriated from U.S. Tension as Lagos street urchin stamp Air Force officer. Lagos bond subscription hits 310 billion naira. Beside the masthead of The Punch, Obasanjo Fayose reignite old enmity, trade insults. Above the masthead of The Punch, 2024 Capital Project Store 2026 budget plans. Inflation hits 3-year low at 16.05%. PDP headquarters showdown, Makinde, Wike fashions hold rival next sessions today, and that story is on page 40. It's also a traction, a leading story on the papers, on our lineup, and in other papers as well. PDP headquarters showdown, Makinde, Wike fashions hold rivals next sessions today, and that story continues on page 40 of the paper, and that also brings to a close the review of front headline stories on The Punch newspaper this Tuesday. Don't forget to log into the website of The Punch for continuation of those headline stories. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup this Tuesday, and that is the Daily Sun. Daily Sun is on the PDP showdown. It says showdown loops at PDP headquarters. Turaki, new national chair set to assume duties, schedules NWC meeting, Wike's men plan parallel BOT and NEC meetings at same venue. And these are kickers to the leading story on today's Daily Sun newspaper. The showdown looms at PDP headquarters. Still on Daily Sun, Wike and Rule of Law by J.B. Dawudu, SAN, that is Senior Advocate of Nigeria, is also a leading story on Leadership newspaper. Fayose tells Obasanjo, you are a madman who should be kept in the zoo. Okpebolo seeks repatriation of Obaseki of Agric mechanization. We move towards the masthead of Daily Sun newspaper. Justice mustn't be for sale. Tinubu urges judges, says compromised judiciary threatens democracy. Lastly, on the cover of Daily Sun, I think that concludes because the cutoff has cut off the leading part of the other news beside the masthead. So it's on this note we come to a close of the review of Daily Sun newspaper. For more, log in to the website of the Daily Sun. We move ahead to the last paper we have on our lineup this Tuesday, and that is The Guardian. The Guardian says declining food prices, farmer naira pull inflation to 15% national target. Declining food prices, farmer naira pull inflation to 15% national target. And of course, as usual on the Guardian, we have illustration beneath the leading story. Let's just take the illustration one after the other. Rice has reduced to 24%, eggs 27%, beans 48%, gari 44%, groundnut oil 17%, soft drinks 67%, carton of chicken 15%, and bag of sachet water 67%. We have headline inflation 33.88% from old base year 2009, climbed to 24.23%. And now we have 16.05% in October 2025. Security fears deepen over schoolgirls' abduction, slain general amid new assaults. Obasanjo Fayose trade wars over birthday fallout. Media warsmith Dan Agbese dies at 81 as LNC orders mourn. NIMC issues 124 million NINs as poor interagency relations to data harmonization. 16 Taraba PDP lawmakers join APC ahead of Kefas. Wike military land feud, Dauda insists on rule of law. Same leading story on leadership and the other paper we saw before that, and that is the Punch newspaper. Wike military land feud, Dauda insists on rule of law. And the story continues on pages 26, 27, and 28 of The Guardian. We move ahead to the masthead of The Guardian newspaper. Mass defections, Ndume predicts implosion in APC. Genocide, U.S. lawmaker alleges Tinubu lying, protecting own interest. PDP crisis may consume 2 governors, others as factions fix parallel meetings. And that also concludes the review of front headline stories on The Guardian this Tuesday. Don't forget to log into the website of The Guardian newspaper, www.guardian.ng, for continuation of those headline stories. Well, viewers, all too soon we've come to today's program, to the end of today's program, Inside Nigeria, your breakfast show on Leadership Television. Fortunately, we don't have a guest in the studio, but hopefully, same time, same program. Tomorrow, we have another program coming in, and don't forget to join in and keep a date with us. My name is Winifred Webo. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word. Thank you for watching.